Hello and welcome everyone to today's event live from the studio with Parvin Peivandi. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Fauni Barra. I'm the Public Programs and Residency Coordinator here at Griffin Art Projects. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that our work takes place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Stolo nations, to whom we are deeply grateful. As well, we would like to thank the BC Arts Council for the support of the residency program. A quick housekeeping note before we begin. If you would like to see live caption displays for today's presentation, you can enable this by selecting the CC Live Transcription button at the bottom of your screen. Lastly, I'll mention that there will also be a chance at the end of today's presentation for audience questions. So if at any point throughout the presentation you have a question for the presenter, please feel free to type it on the Q&A box. Without further ado, I'll introduce Parvin. Parvin Peivandi is an artist who makes art across disciplines, including sculpture, ceramics, painting, drawing, performance, installations, and community art projects. Born and raised in Iran, Peivandi makes art influenced by Western minimalism and Iranian literature and architecture. By deconstructing the architectural elements and juxtaposing conventional and unconventional materials together, she explored the spaces of personal and public narratives, memories of the place and the dynamics of socio-political systems. Peivandi studied English literature, fine arts in Iran, then immigrated to Canada in 2009 to pursue her career as an artist. Since then, she has studied her BFA at Emily Carr University of Art and Design, her BEd at the University of British Columbia, and her MFA Interdisciplinary Art in the School of Art Institute of Chicago. Peivandi has exhibited her art locally and internationally at significant art shows such as Iranian Ceramic Biennale and Art Expo Chicago. Peivandi is working between her studio in Vancouver and Chicago, making art and doing research, and for her work, she has received awards, grants, and scholarships from BC Arts Council, Shapiro Center for Research, and collaboration in the United States, and SSHRC in Canada. Thank you so much, Parvin, for joining us today. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I want to thank you all for coming to this online event. Also, I want to thank Griffin Art Projects for this studio award. I want to thank Lisa, Fane, and other colleagues in the Griffin Art Projects for this opportunity that led me to make a new body of work and research creation projects. I also want to thank my mentors, my professors in American University, Art Institute of Chicago, my family, my sister, Dr. Banafshe Peivandi, my daughter, Faranak, and my partner, Reza Asadi, for their ongoing support of my education and artistic practice. Thank you all. This journey has not been possible without you, all of you. And as Fane actually explained about my artistic practice, I think it would be redundant that I explain more. I can show some of the images and then we can start from there. I also want to acknowledge again that I appreciate living on this beautiful land of unceded territories of First Nations cultural backgrounds. So I share my screen now and we start from there. Are you able to see this?
Yes, we're seeing it.
Thank you so much. And new slideshow. So basically, I start with this image, that this image is one of my works right now in the Griffin Art Studio that I made during this residency. And this image is one of the first pieces that I created. This is not just an image, it's the kind of combination of a collage, photograph, and 3D forms. And this residency actually started just a little bit after my father passed away in February. And I was in the time of grief, thinking of the body and what happens to the material body after death. I was asking questions that what happens to the beauty which is residing in a body, where this beauty lands again, in which body, in which kind of architectural site or container. And this actually made a poetry in my mind of thinking of how these poetic elements in human nature transforms to other forms. And thinking about these questions and philosophy of being made me read more of the Iranian literature in order to pass the grief time. And most of the time I was reading Khayyam, because Khayyam is the artist, or I can say the poet, and also the scientist who has a dichotomy in his poetry. And that was really interesting for me to think about what happens to body, what kind of transformation happens. I know that mortality is not something that just destroys the body. Also, if it is like that, where the body resides after departure from where the soul resides after departure from the body, and which stories will be made again. So this standing figure for me was like a person who has left the place. And I was thinking of the human body as a site, as a constructed site, that the soul resides in it. And then after departure from the body, where this soul goes, and what kind of constructed landscape can host these beautiful soul and poetic elements. This is the picture of my father's little ceremony that we had in Vancouver. We couldn't go to Iran for his burial ceremony, and that made me really more upset of not being able to go to Iran for his ceremony. And as I said, I'm very inspired by the Iranian literature, specifically Rumi and Khayyam. For this time of my grief, I was reading literature, and literature was guiding me to pass the cycle of grief for me. As you see, Omar Khayyam was a Persian mathematician, astronomer, and poet. He was born in Neyshabur. Neyshabur is 2 hours drive from my hometown, Mashhad, in Iran. And whenever I had chance and opportunity in Iran, I was traveling to Neyshabur to his grave, and we were reading poetry, and there were some literature clubs holding in that place. He's one of the prominent poets in Iran. That his poetry always is, as I said, is kind of operating within the realm of dichotomy of the things, and questioning what is human and where human goes, like where the soul goes, or even thinking about the transient quality of life, in impermanence and mortality of the body. And then Khayyam draws a kind of conclusion in all his poetry, is that if life is so short, why not enjoying the time, and why not just thinking about everything deeply, that enjoy and be present, be mindful of the present time. In one of his poetry that really affected me in my ceramic pieces especially is the poetry that Khayyam is mentioning. The creator of the universe has created a beautiful ceramic jar so masterfully and skillfully, but why the creator again breaks this beautiful, masterful ceramic jar into pieces? Why? Why the creator spends so much time for making a piece so exquisitely and then breaks it into pieces? And this actually brings a sense of being really in deep sadness, but at the same time thinking that if the material body is so vulnerable and is close to the mortality, or is close to the uncertainty of the duration of the time, why not being present in the moment and be mindful of the joy? And Khayyam actually is metaphorically referring to the idea of wine, or enjoying the moments by being drawn into the mystery of universe and beauty that is around all creatures and all forces in the universe. This piece I made was one of the first pieces that I made in Emily Carr. I want to show you a few pieces before my arts in Griffin Art Projects during this residency, to give you a context about how literature has affected my art and how I'm looking at objects as abstract bodies of the individuals. This piece that I made in Emily Carr, it's all ceramics pieces. All these little structures that you see here are fragments of the Persian alphabets and calligraphy on top of ceramic tiles. And I was thinking about my immigration and what happens to the culture and art of Iran when people are immigrating, or when the government is not taking care of the cultural artifacts in Iran and beautiful architecture. And I thought that this is like a separation, and this piece is inspired by the Rumi's poetry of separation, that all pieces are scattered and broken into pieces, and that they are dangling on a metal rod, and they are going precariously, like shows that they are kind of falling down into the pound of black engine oil that is here. So it was a big installation, 7 by 8 feet pond, and then the pieces were installed on top of this black engine oil. And also black engine oil is metaphorically representing many things, but I don't want to go to about the kind of details of this work, but this work is inspired by the literature and the separation, fragmentation. This piece is the first piece that I made in Chicago when I not immigrated, but I went to Chicago for second move the second move in my life to study my master in the School of Art Institute of Chicago. And this piece was the first piece that I made, having a leftover of a Persian textile that was worn out and torn, and then trying to think that how I can make this body live again. I was looking at this little leftover of the fabric or textile as an abstract body that is left out, that's alone, that's separated from like others, and then how can I make it standing? And then a little piece of found metal rod helped this little fabric to stand. And it shows my actually my attempts or try to make the body stands again, or to sympathize with objects, or thinking of objects as live bodies, or abstract kind of bodies of the individuals. And then I thought that, oh, why I am so drawn to steel. And I was sympathizing with the leftover of the steel kind of pieces which were in the metal shop in SIC. Basically, as students were going there, they had some CNC cut pieces, and the leftover of the CNC cuts had some empty negative spaces in them. They were large sheets of steel that they were putting in the recycled bins, like a scrap of metal. And they were big and harsh. Some of them were thicker gauge of metal. So for example, they were like 16 gauge or 14 gauge, some of them very hard to bend. But I don't know, I just thought that I want to make art from this, again, leftover and recycled material. And parallel to me taking care of the textile, I was taking care of this steel too. I was going to the metal shop. I took this big sheet of leftover steel sheets that were cut out of the CNC. And I was wrestling with these pieces and formed them in a form of kind of a dynamic form. And I brought them to my studio and tried to make a composition with my textile. So this is one of the iterations. Unfortunately, I don't have pictures of all the iterations that I've made, because very soon my studio in SIC became that was a kind of small room full of folded metal. And then my advisor at that time, when I was studying, he came to my room and said that, Parvin, your room is all these metal folded forms, and you don't have any space to make new work. Just throw away these pieces and start a new project. I didn't document, and I think that changed my direction. But if I come back, I continue this project, because I thought that the moment that I was sympathizing deeply for these pieces, and I wanted to shape this metal leftover to the form of sculptures, were very important in my practice. There was a reason for it. I did also two performances in SIC. One of them was this one. I got those CNC leftover metal sheets, and I had a performance in front of the audiences. I had a little Caesar in my pocket, and with my body, I wrestled with the big flat sheet of steel. I folded 4 times like a paper, although it was a thick steel. And then I took actually another piece that was left over there, and that was a Persian rug, a worn out Persian rug. And I cut the Persian rug in a way with a little scissor that I had in my pocket with the bare minimum material that I had to embed it inside this metal steel. I wanted to combine and fuse these 2 forms, 2 leftover, 2 disparate material joined together to make a sculpture. And that was my attempt to make, maybe to condition my body, to make myself stronger, I think. So this is the result. The sculpture could stand. Both pieces in the beginning were flat, but then after this kind of performance, I could join them together in front of the audiences, 2 leftover materials. And the piece was beautiful after I just took photos from different angles, and this is one of the iterations. And again, I thought that I am very sympathizing, or I am really caring about the steel body. Even I thought that steel is a body, is a leftover body, and I found a sheet metal that was leftover, and I took it into the metal shop, and I thought that with so much labor, I can make this body more precious. Because I've noticed that in Western minimalism that I am influenced by, like the work of Carr and the work of Donald Judd and other artists that are working in that kind of art strategy of Western minimalism. They look at the industrial objects as the objects that they are industrial. But I'm not looking at the industrial material like that. I just think that even industrial material have a lot of life in it. There is a lot of blood, sweat, and labor in making a sheet metal. Many people have worked hardly, and memories and traces of their body are embedded in this material to make it ready for the industry and production and consumption. That's why I wanted to make this sheet metal showing that labor. So I went to the metal shop and I spent hours of working on this with different techniques: forging, torching, hammering, welding, different techniques, whatever was possible for me. And I made it like a beautiful rug. So if you see the piece in person, you would be surprised at how the texture of this metal looks like a textile. And I found that I wanted that people look at a rigid material right now, like like a kind of soft material that has more life and traces of memory in it. I thought that by putting labor in it, I create lots of memories for the piece. And then I was learning weaving, and I think I am connected to the ancestral knowledge of my cultural background as Iranian. The masterpieces of weaving rugs, and thinking that my grandmother was a great weaver, and my great grandfather was having a kind of workshops for making rugs in Iran, and they were exported to Germany. So I came back to the practice of weaving as a kind of practice of really high labor practice, in which I have more close reading of the material and attention to details and putting pieces together, fragments together to create a rug. So I took some of the donated yarns and made a kind of weaving with jacquard loom. It's a kind of computerized loom that you basically should stand by the loom for 8 hours or 9 hours, whatever that it takes. So much labor, but the computer reads the design and then you just weave. And this was one of the other pieces that I made in Chicago, one of my early pieces that I was thinking about the geometry, abstract geometric in Persian forms, and how can I apply these forms like in a kind of space between the Iranian architectural forms and the Western minimalism, that how if we look at the fragments, they speak the same, both in the Western minimalism and in the Iranian geometric abstraction and the forms and design in Islamic architecture. So these forms are taken from the form of mosaic mirrors that I have gone through an apprenticeship of mosaic mirrors in Iran, in my hometown, Mashhad. As my hometown is a city well known for beautiful architectural ties and mosaic mirrors. And basically all wall art in my city mostly defined as wall art. So that's why most of my arts are speaking to the wall. And these pieces, I wanted to change the scale and also the materiality of the mosaic mirrors to something more obscure, more rigid, and at the same time something like in veil, because the mosaic mirror is transparent, you can see yourself inside, and it's kind of more fragile, and this piece is stronger. And again, by making this, I wanted to comment on my own identity or conditioning myself or my body to be stronger. I was looking at myself as one of these fragments, as a woman trying to be more stronger, more resilient in a new context and culture. And then I made lots of these fragments as installation, big installation on the wall in the Sullivan Gallery, a curatorial project in Sullivan Gallery in Chicago. And then I was thinking about the nomadic quality. Like, again, most of my works, I think, are autobiographical in a sense. I'm thinking of my body as an architectural site that my soul resides, but also this body speaks to other bodies, the bodies of other individuals, objects, and forces of the nature, as new materialism defines in Western cultural theories. So I was thinking of nomadic quality of our life, like how we move from one space to another and how we try to survive with the basic material or whatever that is available in a new place. So these pieces are made with the minimum material that I had in hand. For example, this one is just a sheet of metal, steel, and then a piece of leftover of the Persian old rug. And then this piece I just bended to triangle and then painted with the beeswax, because I think beeswax has a nomadic quality. So in SIC, they told me I am the first person who is experiencing with the painting steel with beeswax. I don't know, but I was happy about this experimentation, and I could get get a good result of finding the right moment for two pieces to join together, this beeswax and steel, and also rug, how these three materials can join in a certain moment and certain time. Because the moments that you heat steel, beeswax tends to run away from the steel and melts. But I could find a kind of a moment that the beeswax can stay on the steel, and that was a moment that I thought that, okay, I could make this happen. So in this way, I tried to think that, okay, how can I make the things happen in my life? And this piece was another piece that I made, like about that nomadic being. And this is, to me, a woman again, woman reimagined. I was imagining myself as this woman, like that is making, constructing its own identity or body or energy again in a new context. And as you see, always there is a grid system or some lines that shows that it's like a web or weaving the parts again. And then I think mourning and grief or sympathizing and caring, also the dichotomy between destruction and destruction, life and death. Also the dichotomy between impermanence and permanence. The dichotomy between beauty and ugly, the dichotomy of being kind of in the two stages of being, always something in my work. And this work, I made few works inspired by by me imagining the leftovers of the airplane crash that happens out of the airplane, that that was a kind of criminal accident, that the airplane with passengers, Iranian passengers, had a crash, and then in Canada, some of the passengers were Canadians. And I was imagining the body, how the body looks like after this airplane crash. So to me, this piece is a body of an individual after airplane crash. Textile here, metaphorically for me, is the body that is worn out. And actually you see the CNC cuts of the text on top of this body, and you cannot read this text because that's like the last words or whatever that comes from the body that is dying in that moment. And also I was inspired by my father's, the stitches on my father's chest after heart surgery here in just the middle of the sculpture. So for me, this sculpture was visceral, and also it's reflect the body of the individual. And then I made this one, thinking of the airplane again, what's left out, and the combination and fusion of the steel that goes into the flesh of the individual. Yeah, I know it's visceral and painful, but I was actually in shock and pain at that point of receiving the news of the airplane crash. I made this during for my show in Center A in Vancouver. And also this is the third piece related to that theme of survived an airplane crash that I made for Center A in Vancouver. It's steel, leftover Kurdish textile rugs and pigments. And this little piece I didn't alter. Most of my textiles I brought from Iran just as leftover, that they didn't have value in Iran. Most of the time I got it from the village, Kurdish people or people in the village, that their pieces were so worn out that people wanted to dismantle and use the threads for other purposes, like repairing other rugs. And I brought each year one suitcase of this textile. I wanted to elevate this textile. I wanted to make a sculpture of an object which is really humble on the feet of the people or in the stage of being destroyed and dismantled. So taking care of the object again was something that I had in my mind. And here is the installation that I made in Chicago, a big rug, a worn out rug fused with the fragmentation of the metal. And these metals look like they are parts of this body, that they are shifting and kind of traveling from the main body, which is textile, but the textile became strong, become into fragments of the steel that are traveling. And in this work also, I wanted to comment on my immigration or the immigration of an individual. So this piece was a large installation that I did for my MFA show in the Sullivan Gallery in Chicago. And as you see, the pieces are on the floor, on the wall. They are traveling from the mother, like from the big body to the space, and creating different kind of sculptures or forms. And these are the details. So you see a lot of barbed wire or tensions or threads are passing through this body, or showing that the body has gone through stages of transformation, struggles, or kind of difficulties. And although I think that works looks that there is a pain and suffering in it, but I think at the same time, similar to Khayyam's poetry, there is hope and desire in my works. Desire to be strong again, desire to be elevated, desire to get strength, desire to find friends in a new place, desire to dream big. You know, everything like about that is in the piece. So the textile, which is worn out and exotic or different, gets lifted by steel, and sometimes steel is taking care of textile, and sometimes textile is taking care of steel. And doing that, I'm commenting on the fact that how me as an individual or immigrant, I can take care of others, and others can take care of me in a new environment. That's what we do, and that's my hope or desire to connect. And in this work that I made, and it was sold in Polygon auction, I was thinking of the fragmentation of the form again. And this is a kind of a combination of steel and brass and photographs inside, because I wanted to show that how each of these architectural elements or abstract bodies holds memories. So it was the beginning of using photographs in my works, in my 3D sculptures, thinking of how each object is an abstract body that witness an event. This is one of the other pieces that I made. And this is a piece that I made during my solo show, An Artist Residency in Broad Art Foundation, thinking of, again, the transformation of the body gaining strength in a new context. Also, what happened to this body? What kind of transformation? Some of this transformation burns the body of the rock. So here the hot beeswax melted some parts of the rock. Oh, sorry. But at the same time, a new form and new strength is coming. And this is part of that installation. There are lots of photos of this installation and also other works in the Peralta Art Foundation website. And this is against my ceramic piece, similar to the strategies that I'm working with steel. I was looking at ceramic pieces as documents, as witness, ceramic as witnessing the events, and the photographs are the photographs from my hometown, the architectural sites and people. I wanted to comment that each piece holds lots of memories and untold narrations. And this is the piece that I made during the time of my sadness of when I've heard that my father is sick out because of the side effects of Corona. I was thinking that the death is chasing us, and there is a certain moment that death is like a hunter that captures us. And this is the moments that a fisherman caught a fish, and the moments for the fisherman is a lucky moment, and for the fish is the end or transformation, whatever we can imagine. And again, these two pieces simply came together, joining one point, and it's an unexpected meeting point, the name of this piece. I was questioning what happens to my father, what happens like to his body, and what happens next. And I made this piece during the time of anxiety. And these are the new pieces that I made in the Griffin Art Projects, and these are the ending photos. This is like me thinking of how a broken chandelier makes another layer to the photos. I started this project in Griffin Art Projects thinking of using photographs, and then trying to think of each photograph as, again, as a piece of like a kind of a material made of paper, folding photograph and making it like a 3D object as an abstract body that tells the untold narrations. And again, bringing the dichotomy that exists between different things in life. And I'm questioning those during my grief. For example, what happens to the life or soul after departure from the material body? And what are the destiny, what happens to the soul, which other stories are made. So I wanted in each work to capture one moment of the life of the soul after departure from the body, or like it was like an interviewing my father's soul and asking what happened to you after your departure. So each piece shows, like I try to construct an architecture and a narration and a story and setting, like a plot for each piece, that the soul, the body is not recognizable that much. You get an abstract idea of like the body and kind of the being existing in a new kind of setting and context. What kind of constructed landscape is waiting for the soul after departure? And I used the kind of, again, folded metal beside the folded text, folded photographs and papers. All the materials are only steel and papers. Even the this one that I made, like a similar to cascade or gates, I made it from the paper mache. Everything is very limited to paper and steel. And I wanted to bring these two materials together, one soft and very fragile, and one kind of harder and rigid. And again, it's a kind of dichotomy that exists between these two materials, and paradox and dialectical conversations. And thinking about how this steel now become an intimate object, because it's beside a very soft, gentle photograph, how these two have more connection, or what kind of narration is made through the juxtaposition of these two, or constructing of the feelings, by fusing these two materials together, or juxtaposing these two materials together. And again, in this work, sometimes steel is taking care of photos, and its photo is hidden under a steel, or sometimes like the steel is playing the stage for the photograph. And in some of the works like this one, the material body of the steel has gone through labor, torture, pain, suffering to show that the transformation happens in the body of the steel as an abstract body. So this is basically me questioning and chasing a soul in each frame, thinking, is the soul now more free? Is the soul is dancing now? Is the soul is happy and well taken care of? Is the soul in love now? Like, questioning what happens to the soul, and where is this beauty now? And this is one of the pieces that I made in Griffin also. And these works are still in progress. I need to do something about the surface, finishing and polishing a little bit. But I was thinking of this metal structure as a cage, as the material body, physicality of the body, which is like a cage that contains the beautiful soul and poetry inside it. And it's like a prison, and after death, this would be free, but I don't know what happens to it. So I juxtapose it with another big rug, that the rug is bigger, but here is, I just showed you a detail, but the work is in the studio. I can show you shortly. And I was thinking of, again, the dichotomy between life and death, and between physical body and the spirituality of being, or soul. And I think that was the last picture that I showed you. Thank you so much for watching the presentation.
Thank you, Parvin. Do you want to show us the last work that you were telling us about?
Yeah, you mean in the studio?
Yeah, in the studio.
Yeah, let's take you to the studio. Unfortunately, like most of the time my studio is very busy, but I hope that you have is it good enough?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see the whole piece.
Yeah. So basically, I don't know how to make it straight. So the work is, as I said, the work is about this dichotomy, and I made the metal structure before, but I composed the two pieces together with the composition of rods and everything in Griffin. Then I can show you other works too, also the big piece. But let's go closer to the metal, like a kind of piece that contains the rug inside. And this is two pieces basically. The other piece is here. So I composed the other piece also is made of the leftover of the steel in the metal shop. So whatever is left over, or objects like orphan objects, I use those objects in my art most of the time. And this rug, my amazing friend Carr gave it to me. I like that how people in Vancouver know me as the rug lady or the carpet lady, because they know that I am very passionate about carpets. So Carlin gave it to me, and I brought it to the studio, and I said that this piece meant to be here and be part of my work. So that happens during the Griffin Art Residency too, the donation of this rug to me. And this is a big installation that last night my partner Reza, he's very supportive of my practice. I don't know how to thank him. He helped me to clean the pieces and polish the pieces, because polishing steel is difficult. It gets the traces of the finger oil all the time. But this is the whole piece that you can see here. So I wanted that you get a kind of sense of it, not in the photograph, but here when I show you the studio. So let's go a little to the back. Do you see it well? I can go close and you see the details too. So this composition still is in process. You see that some parts of it is doesn't have photographs, or still is not kind of complete. This is my attempt to finish it to the end of the residency. But I am glad of experimenting this project in Griffin. I'm very thankful to this opportunity. because this space, also feedback from Lisa, was really great for developing this work here. And each work, as you see, right now has each piece of this work is a fragment that has freedom to be composed in endless possibilities, like my other works. My works and attempts or kind of likes to have some sort of freedom, liberation that maybe I haven't experienced myself that much in my previous, like in my old time in Iran. So here you can see some of the details of the studio shot. For example, some of the works are metal structure as grid system, that we know that the grid system in modernism has a lot to say about the modernity and order and classification. But I use it as a kind of grid system in Persian rugs also, in making things that is common between cultural practices and art making, between different cultures, diverse cultures. And also in some of my works, I used some sort of Iranian illustration or kind of image that is golomor. It's a flower and canaries or birds, because I thought that this I want that to leave sometimes the traces of the identity that is there. Also, I want that you see the folds here, that these are the last pieces that I made that the photograph got some folds, similar to metal that they have folds. Also, this one is that golomorph that you saw in the pictures too. And this one is kind of photograph that I folded like a geometry by itself. And it kind of has some sort of movement when you move the camera. So I got to shape the photograph also like a 3D object and folded body also. And these are the folded bingo like a style in Iranian culture, that when we were kids, we were playing, and it's a bingo, so you don't know what happens, whatever numbers that you get, and the lucky winner has the most, has the person who has reached the maximum numbers in the card. And I thought that this is like life, whatever we get, it's like a chance. So this happens to the soul and the body of an individual, that everyone has a different story and narration and is not all under control. Something that we cannot control it. And it's talking about the impermanence, as I said, or transient quality of life. And I wanted to show you this one as the metal piece that has some welded kind of parts that I created barbed wire with a style of welding. And these are the leftover of the metal pieces in the metal shop too. I used leftovers of the metal in the metal shop. This one is the same, similar strategy. So these are the pieces, and then I used the folded steel between my composition. So as I said, this composition still is ongoing. Hopefully it gets kind of more pieces, more fragmentation, and also better iterations by the end of this residency. And this piece that you saw in the beginning.
Excellent, thank you. Just a reminder that we're open now for questions.
Thank you.
So if you have any questions, please type it in the Q&A dialog box. And while that happens, I'll open up with one of my own, if you don't mind, Parvin.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your presentation. It's great to learn what you've been up to and like what is your background. You were talking about the human body as a constructed side, also as a constructed landscape.
Mhm.
And then you were also mentioning that some materials are inherently nomadic.
Mhm.
So I wonder if there's a connection to be made between these two understandings of the body as a constructed landscape, and then some qualities that have that are inherently nomadic when you create.
So your question is that how can I use these nomadic objects or material in my work if I
Yeah.
want to? Yeah. I think, as I said, my works are autobiographical. That's why I think people who are immigrant or they are coming from a different culture and then living in a different new culture. For example, you and I, we have experienced this nomadic journey more than people who are born in the same place. And this nomadic experience helps us to think that we have a kind of very rich experience of living between cultures. So as Doris Salcido says, for example, Doris Salcido said that the third world identity for her is something that she really appreciates, that because living in the third world country is like living in a condensed capsule of human experience, you know, because the interactions of the people is so close, or the way of life is somehow different. So if a person has that experience of living between cultures, between countries, or between cities, I think the nomadic experience is changing her viewpoints and practice deeply. That's what I think I use the nomadic material in my art, because I want that even the material shows that traveling and kind of the experience of being between cultures, being always in travel, always in the journey of becoming. So that's why I found that my material, also my technique and artist statements all have more integrity.
Yeah, nice. Thank
Thank
you. We have we have 3 questions now. You
you.
can see them in the Q&A panel, but I'm gonna read them to you.
Thank you so
The
much.
first question that we have says, is there an artist that inspires you or inspired any of the pieces shown today?
There is not just one artist, to be honest, because I have learned a lot from curators like my professor Patrick Anderson, my professors Marina Roy, Alexandra Phillips, Paul Matthew, Julie York in ceramics, Darcy Margesson, different professors and curators that I had the opportunity to work with. But the artist that I really love their work is Lee Bontico, is Nick Cave, and Wilson, that I'm actually learning the sense of care and empathy, sympathy towards objects from them. And Doris Salcido, as I said. These are actually the big main mentors that I haven't, I have actually the privilege of learning from Nick Cave, but not for, and Wilson, but not having opportunity to meet in Doris Salcido in person. But these are my big kind of mentors in my life, artists.
Excellent. We have another question here, and it says, thank you so much for sharing your art. I'm curious about your perspective of the geometric shapes, particularly the triangle, which is repeated in your work.
So they are curious to know why this geometric abstraction is coming?
Yeah, like why the triangle and why is it repeated in your work?
Mm-hmm. As I explained in my presentations, I like these questions because they are talking about the geometry. It was first it started from my appreciation of geometry from my childhood, because I was looking at the geometry in mosaic mirrors, as I said, in the architectural forms in Iran, in my hometown. Then I did research about the geometric forms in different cultures, and I found that there is a sacred quality and openness and abstraction and mystery around the geometric shapes in different cultures. For example, we see in Mexican culture, we see in First Nations culture, we see in Western minimalism, we see in Iranian arts, we see all in between different cultures that the geometric patterns exist. And then they are kind of mathematical, they are spiritual, they are talking to divine, they are talking about the kind of translation and abstraction of the natural forms into simple shapes in order to make it ready to and easy to weave, for example, on textile. So geometry makes it kind of pixelation or easy to weave or construct. Also, it's sacred, as I said, and it has some mathematics in it. And the triangle for me, it's so strange. Triangle, I'm very drawn to triangle too. It's like actually a feminine, or I think of triangle as a woman. And I don't know why, but to me, is a woman. And also there is a recurrent motif of a diamond in my work. And I don't know why it's coming back in my art whenever even I try to avoid it. But that's little diamond that is like an open window and portal is coming to my work. I can show it again here. So I think that has some triangle quality in it too. But I'm very drawn to this form. It's actually a piece of mosaic mirror that I converted to this folded paper right now, or steel. But it's quite interesting that to me is like feminine. I see it as a woman. And I want in my work that the works has the kind of repetition of these female bodies or the bodies of the individual. And geometry for me is one fragment of the community or individuals, like society, for example. One fragment, one geometric pattern for me is one abstract body, because it has abstraction, untold narration that exists in humans' body. Because the human body is not just physicality, it's a beautiful poetry and existence inside us. And I want to refer to that. That's what I pick, geometry and abstraction rather than a physical appearance.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer. That's really interesting that you're referencing the body again through geometrical forms, especially like the body of a woman. The next question here, they ask, are you thinking about publishing a book about your work and your story someday? I think you should.
Thank you so much. Definitely, I like that the voice be heard. I don't mind about my name, but I want the voice of an immigrant woman or a voice of a person who has pursued a life, a journey of becoming an artist, a journey of becoming a writer, or understanding the mystery that exists in the poetry of being a human, occupying a physical body of a human, and experiencing the world from the perspective and vision of a human body. Yeah, I like to write down. I like to write down creatively about my experiences, also include some of my work.
Nice. I look forward to that. Next question is from Jasmine. And Jasmine asks, if you were to add another material to these pieces, what will that material be? Great use with the combination of soft and hard materials.
So if I want to add another material, what would be the next material?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of adding some sort of experimenting with something like to cover part of my pieces. I have done painting by metal sculpture with beeswax, as I said, a nomadic material. But I want to experiment other materials, like very creative kind of approach, not just using paints that already have been used, but a new material that I can paint part of my style. So I'm interested of using sand, soil, like another type of wax and kind of other materials, and then make a new covering and coating for my steel pieces.
Nice. And lastly, our last question here is, are you going to have a show of your art in Vancouver in the near future? And is there a way to buy some of your art pieces?
Thank you so much. I'm thinking I have a solo show this year in planned in and actually scheduled in Sunshine Coast Arts Council Seychelles Gallery in October. I don't have any scheduled shows in Vancouver, but I hope so. I like to show in Vancouver and invite the audiences to come and experience the pieces. Basically, I sell my arts through my Instagram right now by messaging to me through Instagram. I haven't talked to any gallery specifically to sell my arts to them in Vancouver so far, but I sell my arts through my Instagram piece. And
Excellent.
I haven't, yeah.
Do you think you can type your Instagram handle in the chat box so everyone can find you?
But it's actually my first name and last name. I'm always going with the same thing in social media, first name and last name, Parvin Peivandi, in Facebook or Instagram, both.
Excellent. And oh, sorry, there's a last question here. So I'll just read it. It says, thank you so much for sharing your artwork. Could you please tell us what kind of music do you listen when you are making art?
Good question. I listen to different types of music. It depends on my mood that day. During the work in the artist residency in Griffin, to be honest, I was listening to the music of Shajarian. Is a classical music, classical music that Shajarian, the best master singer in Iran, has sung. And it's the Khayyam's poetry, the same poetries that I told you that the Khayyam has used the dichotomy and questions about life and philosophy of life and being and destruction of physical body and enjoying the moment. Those poetries were actually in the music. So I was listening to those music. It actually helped me to be more focused and going to the kind of flow of creative energy to create the pieces here. But sometimes I listen to some of the musics that are made in North America or Europe based on what I'm feeling. So I'm listening to some of the soft music by Enya, Lana Del Rey, or other actually musics. I should enjoy that moment, what a certain type of music, but sometimes I listen to Iranian music and sometimes to Western music. I like both, to be honest, not just one thing.
Hey. Okay, and for those wondering where you can see Parvin's work, well, actually, if you want to keep chatting with Parvin, next week on Saturday, May 28th, they're going to have an open studio with the other resident at Griffin, Karen Salamea. I'm going to leave a link on the chat for all of you to check out, and you can pre-register to attend in person. If you're in Vancouver, you can join us at Griffin Art Projects. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Parvin, for your presentation. I look forward to seeing the pieces in person. And if you would like to know more about Griffin and stay in touch, you can subscribe to our newsletter at the bottom of our website, which I will also put on the chat box for you to check out. And yeah, thank you once more, Parvin.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Such a beautiful Sunday day joining us. And thanks, Lisa, Fane, for today. Also, thanks, Karen, my amazing studio mate, and Carl today that they were helping me. Thank you so much. Thanks, Riza. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.